Hi guys, hi, hello, how's it going today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing the next review in my palette roulette series, in which I choose a palette that is in my collection that is also maybe in your collection. We utilize it throughout the week. We talk about my experiences with the palettes. I show you some pictures of the eye looks I was able to create. And then we do some live swatches and pick another palette. And I hope that sounds like that's something you're interested in. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I am a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as the district leader for Ulta, so I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education, so you're going to see a lot of reviews here on my channel. You're going to see a lot of hauls, a lot of like shop my stash, project pan, those kind of things, but also I just really like to talk about makeup, and if you're here, you probably also really like to talk about makeup, so I hope that you'll find solace in your soul the way I find solace in my soul for my channel, and that you'll want to subscribe before you go. And with that said, let's roll into this palette review. The palette that I am reviewing today is this one. It is the Nomad, I think it's Cartagena Magica. Cartagena Magica. I don't know how to say it. You'll find also that I won't be saying the names of the shadows in here. We'll be numbering them because, y'all, I don't speak Spanish. This is based on Cartagena, Colombia. I am no good. I am no good. I am the worst YouTuber right now. But I am not also going to give you the names of the shades. Maybe I'll put it up in like a little bit of a screenshot so that you guys can see the names, because I can't. This is a palette by Nomad Cosmetics, and I'm a fan of Nomad Cosmetics, honestly. This does have a 5-star rating on the Nomad website with 45 reviews, and on IPSY it has a 4.4-star rating with over 16,000 reviews. But this is what the palette looks like. You can see it's got some really pretty, beautiful, vibrant colors on the packaging of the palette, and it just says the name of the palette on the front. On the back, it is just black with gold lettering. It says Nomad on it. It gives you some information about the palette, information about the company, and it tells you over here that it's cruelty-free, vegan, and that it has a shelf life of 12 months. This palette comes in at $37, and it has 15 shades in it, and each one of those pans is 0.05 ounces of product per pan. This is a palette that was launched in 2020, I do believe sometime around the September timeframe, and therefore it's almost 2 years old at this point. But I got it in, I believe, an IPSY flash sale, or maybe an IPSY period. I cannot remember how I came about this palette, if I'm honest. My last Nomad Cosmetics palette did come in an IPSY Plus, so maybe that's where this one came from too. I do know it's been in my collection for quite some time. It just hadn't gotten any usage yet, and I'm trying to barrel through the palettes that really scream spring to me in these first few episodes of palette roulette of, you know, our spring time frame here. You hopefully will have seen that video on Monday, and if not, it'll be coming shortly. But I do have a palettes that scream spring kind of video out there, and this is one of them that I mentioned that I needed to chat through. The lighting just changed in here. Hello, sun. It's been really gloomy outside all day long, so I don't understand where this sun is coming from. Let's change the lighting. There we go. How are we? I think we're good. Okay, so this does have, like I said, 15 shades in it, and this is the color story of this palette. There are 2 different formulations in here. You do have 9 mattes and 6 shimmers. So I do love the ratio of mattes to shimmers in this palette, and unlike the Berlin Untergrund palette, I did feel that had like 5 mattes. I do feel like this one, actually, the mattes are actual mattes. In the Berlin Untergrund palette, I had a real struggle with the mattes because a lot of them were very sheeny, went on much more satiny than they did like a matte, a true matte. These ones all perform like a true matte, except for maybe this one up here, which did have a little bit of a sheeniness to it. This is a palette that is inspired by the city of Cartagena, Colombia, and it's magical and beguiling ambiance, and it is very warm toned. There is a mirror in this palette, which I found greatly useful while I was out and about traveling for work. And like, truth be told, these are my colors. Like, I love these colors on my eyes. I am starting to be kind of a cool toned maven these days, but warm tones will always have my heart. I just feel like they go so well on my very warm olive complected skin. And I mean, you be the judge, you tell me. Most of the time y'all tell me that browns and oranges look really good on my face, and I feel like this really falls into that kind of mindset. This is a cruelty-free and vegan palette. As I said, it also contains rosehip oil, which is good for nurturing your skin. This is also something that they do in all of their palettes. They do have some kind of skin nurturing ingredient in them. There are no parabens, phthalates, mineral oil, talc, or gluten in this palette. This is a very monochrome-ish in color. It's inspired by sun-glowing plazas, golden villas, coral homes, and flower-covered balconies. I could totally see these colors being all over like some kind of Mexican Riviera. You know, I've been to Mexico a couple times. This reminds me of a color story you would find in Spanish art, Spanish homes. And I have to imagine that's also what's going down in Colombia. I don't know for sure. I've never been to Colombia, but I do think that this reminds me of everything that you hear about from the Colombia perspective. I do think that it mirrors very much the front of the palette as far as the packaging goes, and I do like that when palettes kind of mirror what's on the outside of the palette. It is never more disheartening than to get a palette that has a beautiful color story on the cover and to open it up and find like really dull neutrals in a palette that has a beautiful, like, vibrant kind of packaging on its palette. But I would say that there are some colors represented in this cover that I think would have been amazing in this palette, and I will get there in a second. I do think that this palette is best with a primer, although I do think that its wear time and its pigmentation are very compensatory with or without a primer. You're going to kind of see the same longevity and the same kind of pigmentation whether you're wearing a primer or not. I do think that I said that about the Berlin Underground palette as well. I think that it's a palette that works very well regardless of whether you're a primer user or not. When I say it works best with a primer, it's only because payoff of the color story is slightly more brilliant with like a white based primer on underneath. But today I'm wearing just a regular old primer, like not one that even covers up my skin tone underneath, and I do feel like these shadows are performing very well. The fallout of this palette is pretty extravagant amount of fallout that you're gonna get from this palette if you do not tap off your brush. And the reason for that is because these powders are very finely milled. Even the shimmers I found were very soft and silky and felt super finely milled. You don't feel like a whole lot of texture differences between the mattes and the shimmers. Yes, you do feel some, but there's not a lot. They're just so finely milled, which in that way transforms to powderiness in the pan, powderiness if you don't tap off on your face. With that said though, it also translates to brilliant blendability. I think that if you are a person that struggles with blending just so, if you are a person who does not like a palette that has straight up pigmentation but no blendability, you're going to find that Nomad Cosmetics and their formula really works for you, because not only are you getting that straight up pigmentation, but it does have a really easily blendable formula as well for all of its shadows, including its shimmers. But if you are that same person and you don't like fallout, that's kind of going to be a problem for you, because you are going to see fallout with this palette for sure. There is zero muddiness, zero voiding, zero fading or patchiness that happens as you're trying to blend shadows together. What I do think is a struggle bus for this palette is it playing well with other shadows. I do think that it does play well to some extent, but I think that to some extent, naturally super pigmented shadows just become less pigmented on this formula, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because this formula is just so soft and creamy that it just kind of like goes away, falls off the shadow, or what it is, but I did find myself wanting for deeper shadows than this palette provided, and I also found myself really struggling to collaborate this palette with another palette to create a whole eye look. So I could get it done. Obviously, I got it done today. There is a brown from a different palette in my eye look today. I've done it several times. I've used a deepened purple also from a different palette to create some of the eye looks that you'll see. And it can be done. It's just a little more time consuming, a little more delicate that you have to be. It likes to play, but it doesn't like really play fantastically with other palettes. To speak to that, there is no shadow in here that is really deep enough to deepen up a look and give any kind of like depth. So the deepest shadows in this palette are this one here, which is actually a shimmer, and this red here, which actually performs much more like an orange. I think that you can see it looks very orange in this palette, but also is too similar to even this orange or this orange to really create any kind of extra dimension in an eye look. So I did utilize two other palettes to pull in some of the other colors. I used this deep brown in this palette a couple of times. I even used this color in this palette a couple times, and then I even pulled out my Huda Beauty Purple Haze palette, which I wasn't impressed with wholeheartedly in its palette review, but I did really use it for this deep dark purple in here also to pull in some depth with the eye looks that I created with this. And that's where I went to when I was talking about the cover of this palette. Like, I think it's got this like deep navy blue in here. It's got this really deep purple in here. It's even got a black in here. It's got this green in here, and those would have been fantastically represented in this palette and been really helpful in creating depth. I don't like having to pull another palette into, you know, looks I'm trying to create when I'm already trying to create with a 15-pan eyeshadow palette. I feel like all the shadows that I should need should be in this palette. Yes, I 100% understand that they were really going for that monochrome kind of mindset, but then they could have put in a deep brown that still would have like fit in with this thought process. I mean, that's just a personal preference. I do appreciate that the, you know, ratio of mattes to shimmers is really healthy. I think that 9 mattes is fantastic in a 15-pan eyeshadow palette. More than you actually need as far as the mattes goes, but I do think that that is wonderful. And I do think that this color mixed with this color down here created a really nice kind of quasi brown shade. I do have those two colors mixed in my eye look today, kind of in the crease to deepen it up, but I still had to go in with the deeper brown on the outer corner to create that depth. So I found myself pulling for more because I wanted more. I wanted deeper eyeshadow looks. There are a couple of eyeshadow looks that I created with this palette that I didn't pull in other colors with, and I just felt like my eyes looked a little sunk in my face. They weren't like, even though they were bright and brilliant, they weren't like out there. Another thing that I will say is with this palette, if you are not using a white eyeshadow base, which goes back to me saying like is best with primer, if you are not using a white eyeshadow base, these shadows are not nearly as vibrant on your face as they appear in the pan. So you're going to find that they just kind of get lost in an eye look. One thing that I put on here is that I feel like the color in this palette is more of a soft color than a hard in your face kind of color. You know, like you can go in easy peasy or you can go in hard. Cross your fingers that you're gonna pull out the same kind of vibrancy as what you're seeing in the pan. So I do think that it's a wonderful palette. I'm not sad that it's in my collection. I won't be getting rid of this palette. I do really love the Nomad formula. This yellow here was genius because looking at it in the pan, it looks very chartreusey green. Putting it on your eye, it also could look very chartreusey green, but it also could look very yellow depending on the colors that you're putting with it. I loved partnering this color on like this part of my eye look and then partnering one of these oranges on this latter part of my eye look and then putting a shimmer like right in the middle. I think I have a couple eye looks like that, but I think I only got a picture of one that you'll see, and I loved doing that with this color. And dependent on what colors I was pairing it with, it looked either yellow or it looked green. I think one of the eye looks I used this one and that yellow in an eye look, and that's when it kind of leaned a little more green than it leaned yellow. With the oranges, it obviously looks a lot more yellow. There is also a duochrome in here, or at least I feel like it's a duochrome, even though it's not labeled a duochrome. I really feel like this color here has kind of this coral golden shiftiness to it. It was a surprise shadow in my days with the palette because I wasn't anticipating a duochrome. I do think that there was one in the Nomad Berlin Untergrund palette that I also felt that way about, and it was the surprise shock of my life in that moment as well. I will link that video up in my cards. It was like episode 95 or something like that, so it was quite a while ago, but I will link that up there so that you guys can watch it. One thing that I wanted to talk about too is if you're not familiar with Nomad, the reason why Nomad Cosmetics is called Nomad Cosmetics is because every palette that they have is based on like a destination or location. So they have like the Berlin Untergrund, which is based on, you know, Berlin and the underground and all the parties and festivities that used to happen in the Berlin underground. They also have this one based on, you know, Cartagena, Colombia. They have one on Shanghai. They have one on, they create all their palettes based on destinations. And I think that that is the smartest thing that they can do. They go out to this destination, they live in this destination and create the color stories there on the scene of the destinations that they're in, so that they have a real true depiction of the colors of where their palettes are, you know, inspired by. So I love that about them. I also stated in my last video with the Nomad palette that they're also very heavily in their comment section, and they are to the extent that they'll even put out their actual personal email address to like continue to have a conversation with their guests. And I just think that that is so smart. I mean, that is such a smart way to be as a business owner. So we're going to swatch this. This palette does have pictures stamped in it of like animals. I think there's an iguana, there's like a monkey, I think one's a bear, and one's a toucan, I do believe. All of their palettes do come with swatches, or not swatches, stamps in the shades as well. So this first one I can say is called Alpha, and it is a matte lemon yellow. I think that when I say this is a matte and you guys actually look at it, you can maybe see that it's got a little bit of sheeniness to it. I do feel like this one is more of a satin than it is a matte, but that is the only matte that I felt like wasn't an actual matte. This one is a shimmery canary yellow. And then we have the matte yellow that kind of leans chartreuse in some eye looks as well. But on my swatch, it looks very mustard yellow. Then we have the shimmer gold. This is in my eye look today too. It's very kind of sheer shimmer. It's not like a really deep golden shimmer. It just goes right on the top, and that's what I used it for, was actually more of a topper. It is in my eye look today, just kind of giving a little more color to the inner corner of my eye look, but I really found this to be a lot more sheer than I anticipated it would be. And then we have this one, which is a matte, like orange ochre color, and that one is also in my eye look today. Okay, the second row is this one, which is a matte, like beige color, almost an orangey beige, like a orange sherbet kind of beige. Then we have this one, which is the one that I think is really more of a duochrome than it boasts. It is kind of a peachy pink shimmer, and it's got really kind of a golden like flecks to it. Then we have this one, which is a matte orange. Then we have this one, which is a shimmer coral. This one is in my eye look today. Then we have this one, which is considered a matte coral red. And like I said, it definitely looks more orange in an eye look than it does red. All right, so the last colors I'm gonna put down here, we have this one, which is a matte mauve. Then we have this one, which is a shimmer orchid. Again, I just feel like this one is a little bit more like a topper than anything else. Then we have this one, which is a matte peach. Then we have this one, which is considered a shimmer magenta. Then we have this one, which is called Omega. And it is in a matte, like dusty rose shade. All right, so these are the shadows in that palette. I think that you guys can see there is a lot of really brilliant, bright colors in this palette, and I do think that there's a lot of variation in this palette. I just think it's a very limiting palette because even though there's variation, and even though there is, you know, a lot of different looks that you could create with this, there's also a lot of limitations to it because there isn't anything that is really deep here. So final thoughts on this palette. Like, I really do like this palette. I really think it's a beautiful palette, and I will hold on to it. I really love Nomad Cosmetics formula. I think that their formula for eyeshadows are really, really nice. And when I think about this palette and really just kind of look at it and think about what's in my collection, I wonder if I hold on to this, if I also need to hold on to the ColourPop Yes Please palette. I mean, that palette is in my collection. It is pretty old. Not only that, but I prefer this formula to the ColourPop palette format or ColourPop formula, but also one of the biggest reasons why I hold on to that palette is because it has like this duochrome, like orange to gold to peachiness kind of shade inside of it, and I'm wondering if they're like anything alike, but this reminds me a lot of the ColourPop Yes Please palette. But the ColourPop Yes Please palette has a dark brown in it. So it's a palette that I could use alone. It's a palette I could take that one palette with me and know that I have everything I need in that one palette. This also didn't have really a shade for your brow bone. I mean, even this one is just a little bit too like muted yellow and kind of dirties up the brow bone. And this one is too yellow and kind of doesn't go with everything that you need in a brow bone for it. I would rather just have kind of a matte white, and the Yes Please palette has that. So I don't know. I think that, you know, the one and only complaint I have about this palette is that deepening up eyeshadow in it. I wish it had it. They could have put a brown in here and it wouldn't have taken anything away from the monochromatic nature of the palette. So that's the only thing I have to say about that. I will keep it. I do love it. I would suggest Nomad Cosmetics, hands down. They have a really great formula. They're not bad in price point. a 15 shade eyeshadow palette for $37 from an indie brand is really not that bad, like in the grand scheme of things. So I really like Nomad. I've actually thought about purchasing other things from them outside of getting it also in IPSY. So I know sometimes the fact that you can get a palette in IPSY kind of cheapens the brand in a lot of people's opinion, but shit, these days we are getting things like Huda in IPSY, so there's that. I am gonna go pick another palette. I will be right back. Okay, so the next palette I am going to be reviewing will be the Ace Beauty, what is this? Nostalgia palette. This is a palette that I've had in my collection for a minute. It is a palette that I have not used, but because it's been in my palette collection for a minute, I do believe this is the old formula. I don't care. I have a really good time with this brand, so I'm really excited to utilize these shadows over the next week. I really hope that one day, like, the outside weather will match my spring eye look wear day to day. So how is the weather in your neck of the woods? Like, it's supposed to be warm right now and it's just not. It's very windy, very cold. We had some, you know, pretty bad rain the other day. I guess it is what it is. April showers bring May flowers kind of mindset, I guess, but it really is just making me mad because I really want it to be spring. I walked into one of my stores last week and I was wearing sandals and capris, and my the leader that I was talking to looked at me and goes, "Oh, so it's sandal wearing weather." And I'm like, "Not really. It's like 40 degrees outside, but I clearly think that it's spring." So there's that. I want it to be spring. That's what I want to happen. So with that said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you did, you'll consider subscribing, consider giving me a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. If you do subscribe, I want you to be notified every single time I upload, and I just hope that you want to stick around at the end of the day. With that said, thank you so much for joining me today. I do hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you and yours are well, that you're safe, that you're sound, that you're getting along as best you can in this crazy world, that you all are healthy, that you are loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.